Hi, this is Can You See My Screen, a podcast dedicated to running better workshops, training and meetings online. I'm Michael Forrest and I do a lot of video production, live streaming and software development.
I'm Ivanka and I do research, a lot of talking to people, workshops, courses, presentations, and with everything happening online more and more, and all of us having to work remotely, we think we can have chats that will make it easier and better.
We sure do. And this week we are talking about I think we've all come into contact with online meetings and Zoom and Google Meet and Teams and all those things, but not everyone really knows what streaming is, and I talk about it a lot. But I thought we'd just do a quick primer on like what is streaming, as opposed to like having a video conference. So that's what we're going to talk about today. Try to find out. Connected. Right, streaming. What do you want to know?
I don't know why on earth I would bother. Right. I think that's the primary thing. I don't stream as a rule. You stream. I tend to go to meetings, big meetings and little meetings, but nonetheless meetingsy things. And I am curious because often we talk about behaviour online and behaviour in meetings. You go, well, on Twitch people do X. And I, apart from the occasional streaming onto Twitch, weekly streaming onto Twitch with you when we record the podcast, I don't even look at it. I have no interaction with Twitch whatsoever. So I'd like to know a bit more about what's difference between meetings and streamings.
All right. Let me number one. Well, let me so I mean, also I think the way to think about it. Well, I sort of want to explain how you do it, and then I'll explain. Well, no, I'll explain how I came into it. So the way I came into this was, you'll find these videos on YouTube, and they'll have a sort of weird. They'll be long, and then there'll be a sort of podcasty, slightly relaxed conversation. Like that's the first ones I found were sort of between two people, but you'll get them. A lot of streamers are streaming alone, but a lot of this comes from gaming. So I don't know if you ever lived in a house share where there was a games console somewhere. There's this thing where you sort of sit down on the sofa and someone else is playing a game, and you just sort of hang out and you watch them play the game, and you're sort of getting this visual stimulation, but you're just hanging out really. And so I think the appeal, the origins of streaming kind of come from that, where someone plays a game but they put it on the internet so that like loads of random people can come and just hang out and watch them play the game. So it's sort of like a podcast with visuals in a way. Right. But it might be 3 or 4 hours, but you might dip in for an hour, but it's sort of like it has that same role as a podcast, I think, but you can see something. Go on.
I was going to say, so psychologically it's that kind of like being lonely but not alone, or being alone but not lonely, you know walking through a busy town on your own. Yeah. You're surrounded by people, but you're kind of having your own experience.
This is kind of the origin of it, but simultaneously that there were other things tried early on, I think. Like there's a whole sex industry based around this technology as well. But just I think there's been attempts to make it work for kind of like businesses and consultations and things like that. But that I think a few years back that maybe the technology wasn't as easy to use, but now you're sort of seeing a lot more businesses doing live streams as part of their, because everything's content now. You've got to put content out, so it's a live interactive form of broadcasting.
So it's kind I was about to say like radio because it's interactive.
Yes, like radio, or like one of those TV shows where you can text in and vote, or like it's sort of. Yeah, it's like radio with calls. You get a caller, you sort of answer their question, but instead of someone phones you up, there's chat, and chat is a huge part of it. So the difference between streaming and like a video conference is you generally got one person who's doing it, and then everyone else lives in chat. And then there is a sort of hierarchy and structure to that chat. There's moderators, there's different kinds of people in there, and depending on how big a streamer you are, will kind of change the tone of that chat that's coming in. But if I just like tell you the difference between like running a stream and running a meeting. If you run a meeting, you're just you click on the meeting link generally, don't you? And you join the call, and you have to install Zoom, you have to install this or that to set it up. You go start a new meeting, and it's sort of really it's a kind of peer-to-peer thing. Streaming is more, you download a piece of software, like OBS is the big free one that everyone uses, and then there's other tools like the one we're using now called Ecamm Live, and there have been other ones, but I kind of feel like certainly on a Mac a lot of people are using Ecamm Live, especially business people that have businesses don't mind paying a bit of a subscription for something that's straightforward to use. OBS is a little bit more like difficult to get your head around, and it sort of asks you but you have to sit down, you have to install it, and then you sign up to some streaming service like Twitch, and Twitch was a big success for games, but like around about there was that time when Facebook Live was taking off, when YouTube was starting to allow live streaming, sort of I think around 2015, 2014, 2015, 2016, Instagram, all these platforms started adding, because it started from Periscope, right? Like people were sort of walking around live streaming and talking to people in the world on their phones, but this is more a sort of desktop thing that I'm generally talking about when I say streaming. So you'll get OBS and you'll sign up to Twitch, you'll have your YouTube account, and you'll say I want to stream, and you'll get a special stream key, which is some like long string of numbers, and you'll plug that into your OBS, and then OBS will just start sending data to YouTube, and with that stream key it'll know who you are and it'll stream it to the right channel. So you sort of go live, and now you're just broadcasting to the world, and anyone can potentially find you, although in practice that doesn't happen so much. And you're just like broadcasting like a radio station, like a TV station, essentially.
So it's the people can potentially find you bit. That's it. There's two things that are interesting. One, I think, the potentially. So there I am. I have decided I'm going to. Maybe we should talk about why I would be doing this. But let's say me as a user researcher. Let's say I wanted to read an excerpt from my book to the world.
Yeah.
And I maybe want to accept some questions via chat. But I don't really want to have a dialogue with anybody. I don't really want to talk. I just want to broadcast, I suppose, is the streaming. I don't know why it's different to broadcasting. So, okay. How do people find me? Who's looking? Where are they looking?
We'll pin how it's different to broadcasting for now. But like, why are they... People... So one way is you'll say what game you're playing. It comes down to SEO in a way, like categories. So there might be categories on the platform, and so you can. Generally, how Twitch works is there'll be all the different games, and someone will look for someone playing that game, and they'll find them, and they'll decide if they like them, and they'll go down the list until they find someone they like that's playing it, and then you're sort of getting to see progress in that game without having to actually play it for hours yourself. And you also get to like backseat and tell them they're doing it wrong, and some of them don't like that, and some of them don't mind, and it's a whole culture. But on YouTube, there are more sort of businessy categories, more variety of categories. And Twitch, in fact, when I started streaming on Twitch in 2014, didn't even have a music category. You'd sort of have to, but there was a game that was called like music something or other. So you'd pick that game, and then people would be able to find you that way. Since then, they've been doubling down on the music stuff a lot more. And they've got like a coding and software development one now that they didn't used to have either, that came in quite recently. So there are sort of top level categories, or like games it used to be called, now it's just like the category, and then there's tags within that, and people can filter on that and find you. And some people will scroll down to the bottom of the list and start trolling the people with no viewers or 2 viewers or 3. On YouTube, the discovery is the way discovery generally works online. If you've got a lot of Twitter followers, then you can get people onto your stream. If you've got good SEO is obviously going to work differently, because it's not going to be indexed in that sort of long-term way. It's a live thing, so you need to, like, YouTube doesn't particularly promote streams, and I think it's quite hard to find anything if you don't, or if you haven't been invited to it directly. It's going to be sort of peripheral platforms that are going to bring you into that. And then like something like Facebook, there's a different experience, because Twitch, you'll sit down and just join a stream for like 2 hours, Facebook, people are scrolling through, like getting that like dopamine hit, and so they might see you for like 10 seconds and then scroll past you, and it's a different sort of stream on Facebook to how it is on Twitch. So I always come back to Twitch because it's one that people stick around, and they're quite generous, and it's quite an interesting place. But it is weird because it's got this gamer focus. So I think there is space for a platform that is a bit more professional, that learns some of the lessons of Twitch, which has developed a lot of conventions that YouTube has sort of got versions of in their live streaming, but it's a different kind of thing. But yeah, as far as discovery goes, it's a bit of a like meme really, that the discoverability is horrible on Twitch, and it's sort of, there was a recent leak that kind of showed that basically there's a 1% thing, like at the top 20 streamers are getting like 99% of the revenue kind of thing. That number is not exact. I'm not sure what it is off the top of my head, but generally if you're at the top of the list of that game, then you'll get discovered. If you're not, you're probably streaming to no one.
So there's kind of the act of streaming, and maybe this is where we unpin the broadcasting, and then there's the platforms that they sit on. So you've got and with those platforms come different audiences. So you can stream on YouTube, you can stream on Facebook, you can stream on Twitch, and there are different people that might, I don't know, happen across you on those different platforms. Exactly. Their behaviours. What's that thing called? It's not called the coal shed, the bike shed. What's that new thing called that you mentioned in the last podcast? Clubhouse.
Yeah. Audio.
I'm showing my age. The bike shed, Clubhouse. But is that a streamy thing?
No, that works slightly differently. It's more like a big group phone call, as far as I can tell. But it is streaming the audio, but only in the same way that any meeting app is streaming the audio. And that's to say, like, you can download and install OBS and do it, but you can also get like the Twitch mobile app. You can just go live as you're out and about, and people aren't always sitting down. In fact, one of my app users has this streamer IRL backpack, like it's called, and it's this whole thing. It's a special thing that can stream over like satellite from anywhere, like, and they'll plug in my camera app into it, and they'll film themselves wandering around the streets and talking to each other, and have like thousands of people watching and commenting, and they'll be reading chat. There's like 2 of them. It's a whole strange world. So this is called IRL, in real life streaming. So there's a lot of weird stuff you can do with it, and it's really like, but there's a sort of culture on Twitch certainly of like a regular audience that they'll if you can kind of get into a flow, then people will sort of tend to come and join you and hang out, and you'll sort of feel like you're friends with them in a way, in a way that I haven't really seen much on other social media, despite the fact there is this I'm the streamer, you're the viewer kind of dynamic. So yeah, but it takes a certain amount of practice to be able to pull off a stream and talk to yourself for hours on end.
You've got to keep the noise up, especially.
You've got to keep this radio, right? It's like dead air, like, because you get some streamers that will kind of go live and they'll just be like muttering and going, oh god, and playing the game, they get killed up, and there's a lot of what you see on something like Twitch will just be like people that just aren't really cut out for it, or having a bad day. And there is a bit of a catch-22 sometimes where you're seeing the viewer count and it's 0 or 1, and you're like, well, what's the point of even talking? And then no one's going to stay on your stream because you're not talking. So you got to sort of treat it like this broadcast, even though you can see that no one's listening. So actually, when we do the podcast now, I just turn off the viewer count, because it upsets me when it goes up and down, because there's so little feedback if people don't start typing in chat, that you sort of wonder what's going on, really. But in terms of it being a broadcast, it's very much improved when it's more interactive. And what's cool about like some of the bigger streamers is there's always some funny people in chat, and so they can sort of add to it, or ask things, or there'll be sort of funny comments that the stream will sort of read out, and there's something about like you'll jump into a stream, because it's not like thousands, there might be 20 people. A good stream can be 20, 30, 40 people, and you'll kind of say something in chat, and then a few seconds later they'll be talking to you directly by name, and it can be quite intense, and it's sort of, you're like, oh my god, like I exist. And I think for a lot of people, it's sort of a proof of their existence that they can, that someone says, oh, thank you, Michael Forrest, thank you, for this. And you're like, oh god, I'm in a room with this person. It really does kind of feel like that. Um, and to the point that if I sometimes don't want to say something, because then I have to kind of like, I can't really just close the window now, because
Right.
I'm
You've got
sort of
to
waiting
see
to
it
see if
out.
they reply, and they might ask me something, and suddenly I'm kind of committed to this interaction in a way that, like, TV, you can just turn it off and you don't care, but this,
Yeah,
like, you
yeah,
sort of feel like you have this social obligation in a way to the streamer once you start
because it,
talking. And some people
yeah.
will be like, some people in my chat will be like, oh, I'm just going to go and have something to eat, and you're like, okay. But from the other side, you're like, yeah, I don't want them to say anything to me, because I'm like off. I'm just popping out for a moment. So
Yeah,
it's
yeah,
very
yeah.
interesting.
It's quite. It is. It does sound like a whole different. It's making me. It sounds a bit like it's reminding me of if you like radio. I feel like I'm old now, but like
Yeah,
radio, and then there's this trend around slow TV that I'm aware of.
yeah,
So
yeah, yeah,
like kind of like, but that requires no interaction, and I think that's the element that's interesting. And what you were saying earlier about like gaming, you referred to gaming and the sex industry, and both of those
yeah,
are things that have driven loads of technology innovation that then in, I don't know, professional life that doesn't involve gaming or the sex industry,
yeah,
we tend to be really slow to adopt the technology, and then we
yeah.
don't
Exactly.
necessarily know how, or we're trying to say, I mean, we did used to, I, I'm very aware that when we worked at Canonical working with Ubuntu, we streamed quite regularly to the internet, full audio, not always video, I think, but
Mm.
certainly audio, so that it would invite more participation. But it was like, I think if it's that sort of broadcast, it's not really, it's sort of going, we've made it open. I am broadcasting in order to say that I have made it available to you, rather than actually actively inviting some sort of participation. So, so when we talk
It,
about working in the open, for example,
yeah,
and you write a blog post, the blog post is there to inform, but it's also to invite a response, give people an opportunity to comment on what you're doing. Whereas if you're just broadcasting all the time, like you've got like a stream from your office, I don't know, what I just did then doesn't require comment, thank you. Or that, I don't know. It's just,
I think back to how it before I really, because really when I discovered this, I was like, this is the Wild West. They were just playing all this copyrighted music, and you just didn't know what they were going to do. Like, what we're watching this person, it seems like he's gonna have a freaking aneurysm any moment. Like, he's going absolutely nuts and throwing things around, and you're like, what is this? Like, how is this even allowed? But it's too new to be policed or like even have any sort of rules around it. And it's matured a bit now in terms of like music copyright and things like that. But it was just kind of anything goes for a while, and you could just like tune in and see whatever. Like, there were rules, like you couldn't do like porn on it kind of thing. But like, sorry if I'm talking too much about that, but it's just, it's like it, as you say, like so much of this kind of emerges from those things, and a lot of Twitch now is like, there's like, you go, oh my god, what? It's sort of like borderline, but I think back to how it felt at Canonical when when they were streaming it, and there was IRC chat like up on the walls and being projected, and it did feel very sort of alien to me then. I never really kind of engaged with it, but there was all those people that were really that were relying on that, weren't they? That couldn't
yeah, yeah, yeah,
come,
yeah,
and it was
absolutely.
so useful to the people that wanted to be engaged, wanted to be involved, that weren't being flown by their company to actually be trapped in a hotel for 2 weeks and not be able to do anything else. But they it was a good way of involving people, and video, like we say audio, but like video is this, just our eyes, a lot of our brain is eye stuff, right? So we
Yeah,
get
yeah.
a lot out of the visual, even if it's like some low resolution choppy thing. It adds a lot to our experience, and the ability for anyone in the world to just sort of like fire up their camera and go online and just be on exactly the same, it's like the internet, but just be on exactly the same footing as anyone that's making a lot of money doing this. I think what I will just want the last aspect of this that I find like really fascinating, and we won't go too long. I can't see the timer on how long we've been going. Is like the money. There is this whole culture of, because there's different ways to get recognized by the streamer, especially if they get bigger. Like maybe putting something in chat, they might just miss it, or they don't have time to read everything. But then you start getting, it's not just someone talking, there are overlays and there are alerts and there's all this stuff going on that kind of like data going on in the stream. So I can have it set up, I can use something like stream elements, I can create an overlay where if anyone ever follows me, it goes and like a little thing goes off and it shows their name, thanks for following, and you go, hey, thanks for following, and that's suddenly their name is on the screen. Or you can set that up so that if they donate some money to you, and they can put a message in if they put a donation in. Or subscribing is a thing on Twitch and actually YouTube to some extent, where someone can actually say, I'm going to give this person $4.99 for the month, and people do it, and then that that gives you like special emotes and privileges on the platform, and maybe in their the Discord can be connected, so you can be like, you can start to build status in this community by virtue of having donated, or been there for a long time, or tuned in, and there's all these different ways that there's these social hierarchies develop, but there's always this like, here's my follower count, subscriber count, who's watching, here's my chat ticking up, here's my notifications coming in as there's donations, how much we raised this month, what's our goal, what's all this thing, and people I think they feel connected in a way that they don't in other places, and that makes them happy you see £10, £20, 50, $100 like dollar donations just while someone's playing a video game, a computer game on stream, and it's this whole world. And people, a new game comes out, someone can make, I saw like one streamer, some of the top streamers for a new game that I watched, like that came out, I think they must have made 20 grand in like a few days just from donations. They were just ticking in every few seconds, like donation, subscriber,
Wow.
subscriber. So some people make a living just streaming and talking and playing games all day long, and that's mad, right? But actually, is it? Because
I think it's
I mean,
just
if you
seems
look
like
at
another performance.
it's like so much of our day, not to turn this into the other podcast, but like, I mean, I'm all for it, because I kind of think a lot of what we do for work is basically performative and status driven, and is sort of a game anyway, so why not make it explicitly a game and let that be people's jobs? Like, why not, if there's less useful stuff to do? So yeah, that's streaming in a nutshell. And
might do it in real life, streaming of a beach cleanup or gardening. Why not?
And that could be a Facebook, and there's different platforms make different sense for different things, and I could see like that being a Facebook thing for you, rather than I don't know if someone's going to want to sit and watch you clean up unless you're really talking to them. Sometimes you get people that will do they'll be tidying up, but they'll be checking chat all the time. If you're like ignoring chat,
you've got to check chat. That's the thing.
No one's gonna care. Like, that's the thing.
I think that's the struggle that I have with all of these. I mean, finding, I think, to take it back to the subject of the podcast, it's managing the interactions, whether it's in a meeting or in a room, and making sure that the experience is right and appropriate, and giving yourself the time and the space to do. Whereas, so because I've just been thinking about in what circumstances I would try and stream versus set up a workshop in a room, and there's that kind of giving a lecture type scenario seems like the obvious choice, or webinars, whatever the hell they actually are, but that sort of thing where you're teaching a thing and you might accept questions at a certain point.
So
you go, right,
it's a different dynamic to that. It's like it's more a continuous engagement than a kind of like, I will present and then you will ask a question, for sure.
But you'd kind of need to be So okay, well, I do feel a bit like I've been well overdue a chat with you about what on earth streaming is and Twitch. I feel like I've been filling in the gaps. What is it for? And how does it work? Why do people do it? I can kind of see why. I think.
It's a strange world. It's an interesting world, and it's one that's more and more like it's just a useful tool for your toolkit. There are situations where it makes a lot of sense, makes a lot more sense than trying to do it as a Zoom call. Sometimes it just makes more sense to stream it. And of course you can stream whatever, like you can stream your Zoom call, and so there's layers and layers to all this. So yeah, but yeah, let's I think we'll end it there. And just say, come to canyouseemyscreenpodcast.com for more information. And there's show notes in the episode description. This is on YouTube. This is on all the podcast places. So please subscribe and all that. And we'll see you next time. So bye.
Actually enjoy it.